back to World Crisis Radio. So looking at the political panorama as the second wave of the world economic derivatives depression hits, and we're seeing every story from Bear Stearns to Lehman Brothers. Bear Stearns done in by collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps. Lehman Brothers, Citibank, Merrill Lynch, collateralized debt obligations. AIG, destroyed by credit default swaps. Forget subprime. Forget poor people buying shoddy properties and defaulting on adjustable rate mortgages. Forget that complete reactionary bag of lies. It's hedge funds, zombie banks, and derivatives at every phase. And nevertheless, the reactionary argument is that the depression, of course, has been caused by the average person taking out those mortgages that were excessive and so forth. In other words, it's a class-based rhetoric which is so naked, so outrageous, that it's unbelievable that anybody sits still for it. So therefore, what we must have, whether the reactionary Republicans oppose it and whether the Wall Street Democrats oppose it of slightly more sophisticated deception form, we've got to have the extension of these unemployment benefits. We want to maintain the 300,000 teacher jobs. We want to get the Medicare doc fix in. The 21% has got to be rolled back. There are other things. There are policemen and firemen, things called the fabric of civilization, which must be maintained. Here we see the reactionary, the liberal Republican, but nevertheless wild reactionary Schwarzenegger has cut 200,000 workers in California down to the minimum wage. The answer is the Tobin tax, the Wall Street sales tax. How come we have austerity and sacrifice for everybody in this population? Wall Street continues to trade billions of shares a day, and they don't pay any sales tax. They don't pay a damn thing. Most of them pay nothing. Goldman Sachs paid practically no federal corporate income tax. They don't pay anything on their turnover. That's got to end. They've got to cough up, kick in, pay their share. You want equality of sacrifice? Start with Wall Street. Don't start with the defenseless workers in the states. In other words, it's a class-based reasoning, again, which is outrageous in its impudence, its hypocrisy, its double standard, and it's just essentially lying. And we see this in particular with this, again, this imbecile Sharon Angle, who can become the parade example of what's wrong. Now, we need a new WPA, Works Progress Administration. Harry Hopkins hired about 8 million people, and they built essentially, you go across, in particular, the upper Midwest, the Midwest, rural America. If there's a library, if there's a school, if there's a municipal building, if there's a airport, if there's a road, a lot of this goes back to the Works Progress Administration. WPA, Harry Hopkins. And let me also point out that the kind of skills you develop in that can be used in other ways. Harry Hopkins, much slandered, was not only the guy who managed to hire 4.3 million unemployed workers and saved a whole lot of lives in that horrible winter of the post-Herbert Hoover hangover, 1933 to 1934. He also then got 8 million on the WPA program. You had another one, PWA, Public Works Administration, Harold Ickes. That was the larger, more capital-intensive things like the Hoover Dam and things like that. But when you then had a war and you had the Lend-Lease program, one of the most essential measures that there's ever been, in many ways a model for what we need to do today, Harry Hopkins became the Lend-Lease expediter. He became the guy who basically set up the Lend-Lease program with the British and then the Soviets. And that was a little matter of winning World War II based on superior logistics and superior production, because that was the basis of winning the war. So those skills are valuable. The kind of mentality that can hire 4 million people in 2 months is also the kind that can outproduce the rest of the world in terms of military production if need be. Now, we don't. That's not the goal. Our goal is the opposite. However, just to get rid of the slanders on Harry Hopkins. So the big difference is that today, if you have a Lend-Lease for peace lease, whatever we want to call it, Lend-Lease for peace, the big thing is don't finance it on the federal budget. Make it a capital budget, because that's what it is. You're going to build schools. You're going to build airports. You're going to build roads. You're going to build fast rail. You're going to rebuild water systems and so forth. Do that by forcing the Federal Reserve to cough up 0% credit for maturities of 50, 75 years. 0% for 75 years. It allows it to be paid back either through very modest user fees or, even better, through the ultimate growth in tax revenue by the states, counties, and cities that are the people who take out these loans. So we're not talking about federal spending, not by federal spending, not by federal borrowing primarily. No. But by federal lending, that the U.S. government becomes its own bank and puts out 0% credit for infrastructure and then for physical, tangible manufacturing, production, agriculture, mining, construction, scientific research. Here, for example, in the degradation of this debate, the Wall Street Journal, Monday, June 28th. Why Friedrich Hayek is making a comeback. Oh, my God. This is some character called Russ Roberts, teaches economics at George Mason University. Oh, my God. His latest book is The Price of Everything, Princeton University Press. Oy. So his story is the Keynesian dead end, the failure of Keynesian stimulus, the Austrian economist's ideas on state power and crony capitalism are getting a new hearing. This is a documentation of the growing barbarism, the cruelty and stupidity of the Austrian school, pushed, of course, by the arch reactionaries at the Wall Street Journal. And he says, isn't it wonderful that Glenn Beck, the alcoholic babbler on television, Glenn Beck, the alcoholic babbler, is highlighting Hayek's road to serfdom, which is nothing but an attack on the New Deal and the Tennessee Valley Authority by somebody who, without the New Deal and the Tennessee Valley Authority, would have remained under Hitler in continental Europe or maybe in Britain, but they would have been rolled over without the U.S. Economy being kept intact under the New Deal. Notice, Glenn Beck. Who pays Glenn Beck? Rupert Murdoch, arch reactionary, Fox News. They all, whatever you hear from Hannity and O'Reilly, it's all Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch went to hear Obama's immigration speech this week. How interesting. But here, we want to get out of the Keynesian dead end. The way out, there is a Keynesian dead end. And that's the Keynesian dead end is the Wall Street Journal editorial on Saturday, June 26th. The Keynesian dead end. The stimulus has failed. Here's the problem. You don't want to have your stimulus, if you want to call it that, you don't want these measures to be done through taxation and the normal yearly federal budget. It's a capital budget. You're building things of permanent value, things that increase your permanent stock of capital goods and also add permanently to the productivity of labor. So do that with 0% lending by the Federal Reserve that you've nationalized in part, or better yet, in toto. You force them to lend to states, counties, cities who want to build things, consortia, Port Authority, or the Transcontinental Maglev Fast Rail Authority. All kinds of authorities can come into existence, and they issue bonds which can then be bought, say, by the Fed or other banks. But the Fed supports this entire thing as a nationalized national bank, as a bureau of the U.S. Treasury responding to the political will of the nation, not the cliques of unelected, unaccountable, secret bankers who are predatory in their mentality. That's the way out of the Keynesian dead end. If you don't have any policy bullets, you do. Rubini says we don't have any policy bullets. We do have them. It's called 0% federal lending. Credit creation for job creation. That's the answer. A case in point. Here we are in Washington, D.C. Washington Post headline today, Friday, July 2nd. 1.8 million people face limits on water over the holidays. Oh, my God, there's a water crisis because a 96-inch water main was about to blow. It was a new one. It was only about 40 years old. But this is indicative of what we need to fix. And we'll say a few words about this now in the second hour. The rebuilding of U.S. infrastructure, long overdue. That's your first task for 0% credit creation and job creation. Back in a minute.